They thought breaking you. They built the walls high, not to protect themselves, but to watch you struggle to climb. Every rule, every false promise, every quiet humiliation crafted to chip at your sanity. You were their experiment in endurance, a soul placed beneath the weight of invisible expectation. They watched, waited, documented every time you flinched, every moment you hesitated. They mistook your silence for defeat. They thought you'd shatter quietly, fall in line like everyone else, become another casualty buried beneath their system's applause. But you didn't. You learned to suffer efficiently, without showing them the cost. You started to notice the patterns behind their cruelty, the rhythm of manipulation disguised as mentorship, the praise that always came with a leash attached. You learned that survival here wasn't about strength, but calibration. When to speak, when to nod, when to appear broken so they would stop striking. You became fluent in restraint. Every injustice they threw at you became a quiet exercise in self-control. You stopped reacting. You started recording, not with cameras or pens, but with memory. Your pain became your data. Your wounds, coordinates, every betrayal was a note in the symphony of their structure. They never understood what happens when you push someone past the threshold of fear. Fear collapses. It inverts. It becomes something unrecognizable. Not anger, not numbness, but clarity, the kind that burns everything false in its light. You felt it the night you stopped caring if they approved, the night you realized that their disapproval was proof you were waking up. You started to sense how deeply they relied on your obedience, your need to belong, your instinct to please. Once you detached from that, the system cracked. You could see it, a fragile scaffolding of power holding up people who weren't powerful at all, just practiced in deception. They'd engineered your fall carefully. They had backup plans for your silence, scripts for your breakdown. But what they didn't anticipate was stillness. True stillness, the kind that terrifies those who need chaos and control. Because you stopped playing, you stopped seeking revenge, explanation, understanding. You became unreal. The moment you detached from their story, you stopped being a character and became the author, and that terrified them. You could see it in their faces, the flicker of doubt in those who once pitied you, their confidence thinning like smoke when they realized the system only works when your quiet became a signal, not surrender. While they mocked your distance, you were learning the architecture of their power. You traced the circuits of corruption, the rituals of obedience. You understood how systems feed, not on control, but on energy. The energy of reaction, confusion, fear. You learned to starve it, you watched it weaken. You started to feel something ancient stir inside you, something patient, strategic, disciplined. Not the desire to destroy, but the wisdom to wait, like a serpent watching the builder of the cage forget to lock the final. They thought the fracture meant failure, but fractures are not the end, they're pressure points. The cracks they left in you became the passages for light, strategy, and truth. You began to move differently, slower, colder, precise. No one noticed at first. They kept laughing, kept underestimating. But behind your still eyes, a new kind of intelligence was forming, forged in betrayal, sharpened by isolation, sealed and silent. You weren't the broken one. You were the anomaly, the system's miscalculation, the flaw that would one day rewrite the entire equation. And that was the beginning of their end. You start to notice it when the noise fades, when the voices that used to sound like truth begin to echo strangely, repeating the same hollow patterns, every order, every expectation, every rule dressed as morality. None of it was real authority. It was programming. You were trained to believe obedience was safety, that fitting in meant survival. But it was never about peace. It was about predictability. The system doesn't fear your chaos. It fears your clarity. And one day, something inside you clicks. You stop asking why me and start asking who benefit. You realize control was never. It was offered disguised as comfort. They didn't chain your hand. They changed your perception. Every praise you received was every punishment was a reminder of what happens to those who stop kneeling. They crafted a world where rebellion looked like madness and conformity felt like peace. You can almost hear their laughter hidden beneath the applause. They wanted you calm, polite, cooperative, not dangerous, not awake. But something ancient inside you starts remembering. A voice too raw, too wild to be conditioned, whispers that compliance is the slowest form of self-erasure. And that's when you begin to see the bars around you, thin, invisible, but everywhere. You watch how they manipulate the rhythm of survival, the false deadlines, the reward cycle, the subtle guilt. You see how fear moves through crowds like smoke, formless, contagious, impossible to grab, but always suffocating. You see how attention became the new form of tribute. They don't need your body anymore, just your focus, your outrage, your scrolling. Every second you react, they win. Every time you explain yourself, they feel. Control doesn't need to scream anymore. It whispers through algorithms, policies, social rituals. You thought you were living freely. You were performing, a puppet trying to please an audience that never existed. You stop. You start collecting data instead of emotion. You begin to notice the pattern behind the chaos, how manipulation has symmetry, how fear has choreography. You observe the timing of their distractions, the language in their propaganda, the way they invert good and evil to make obedience feel holy. You start documenting their tactics the way a hunter studies tracks in the dirt, not with anger, just precision. Because anger blinds, observation liberates. They wanted you react. You became reflective. And that shift, silent, internal, marks the beginning of their end. They sense it, even if they can't explain it. The way your gaze no longer bends, the way your tone carries no need to You stop participating in their rituals of panic. You no longer chase their rewards. You watch them scramble for relevance because your detachment starves their control. You've learned the oldest psychological law: power only exists if someone believes in it, and belief is a choice, the same choice you're now reclaiming. The world starts to look different when you're no longer hypnotized. You see the symbols hidden in plain sight, the architecture of compliance built into schools, jobs, friendships. You see how words like team, loyalty, and stability were weapons dressed as virtue. You see how systems disguised as care were built to extract energy, not nurture it. And the irony burns: the cage was never physical. It was emotional, the kind that teaches you to doubt your own instincts until you forget how power feels in your own hands. But now, you remember. You remember the first time you were told to sit down when your soul wanted to. You remember how every "don't" carved a scar, and you finally understand. Control was never about keeping you safe. It was about keeping you small. Yet here you are, seeing through it all, standing inside their machine like a ghost who learned how to read the code. They thought they'd programmed obedience. What they created instead was awareness. You stand before the mirror, but what stares back isn't you. It's a ghost built by every command you ever obeyed, every insult you swallowed, every time you smiled when you wanted to scream. The reflection tilts its head, studying you with a calm that feels wrong. You realize this isn't glass anymore, it's a portal. Every scar in that reflection is a signature of their design, proof of how perfectly you were programmed to doubt your own strength. You remember how they called you sensitive, dramatic, difficult, and how you believed them. You mistake their fear for your flaw. That's how the system works. It convinces you that your resistance is madness. But tonight something changes. You don't blink first, you look deeper. You see the fine cracks under the illusion, small fractures running through the mask you once called your face. And through those cracks, you glimpse something moving, something older, colder, wiser. You finally see it, the real you never died. You just buried it under compliance. The mirror becomes a battlefield, and your weapon is awareness. Every lie you were told starts to detach from your skin. Every name they gave you, worthless, weak, replaceable, begins to fall away like rust from iron. You feel it, don't you? That slow, quiet pulse of defiance rising from beneath the ashes. The reflection starts to tremble, as if it knows you've spotted the switch hidden behind its eyes. You whisper a single word that you've been afraid to speak: enough. And the glass shivers. For a moment, the reflection glitches, a flash of your true form, unfiltered, unafraid. You don't flinch this, you study it. The pain that once haunted you now looks like data. The shame feels like code. You start reprogramming yourself line by line. Where they installed obedience, you upload patience. Where they injected fear, you rewrite with precision. You realize your emotions were never weaknesses. They were encrypted messages your system hid from their scanners. Each breakdown was a signal, not a failure. They taught you to chase peace through approval. Now you find peace in understanding. They conditioned you to seek safety through belonging. Now you learn safety through boundaries. You no longer beg the mirror to like you. You force it to recognize. That's when the war shifts. The reflection starts whispering, sweet nothings of old scripts trying to pull you back. You're not enough. You'll be alone. You'll fail. But now you can hear the pattern in its tone. It's not prophecy, it's playback. You realize the enemy isn't outside the mirror. It's inside the frequency of your own thought. So you lower your voice, and instead of arguing, you go silent. The silence terrifies it, because silence is control, and control, once reclaimed, rewrites destiny. You stand still as the glass ripples like water. You sense the system's confusion. The version of you that once trembled before authority now calculates its next move. You've stopped trying to escape the labyrinth, you're learning to own it. You see now that survival was never about submission, it was about strategy. Every scar became every heartbreak a key. The reflection fades, and for the first time, the mirror doesn't show your face. It shows your intent. You step closer, and your breath doesn't fog the surface. You've gone beyond. You've become the watcher, not the watch. And though the world still calls your transformation arrogant, you know it for what it is, clarity. You burned every false identity they stitched onto your soul, leaving only precision, the kind that cannot be controlled. The mirror no longer defines you, it obeys you. You turn away, and behind you, the glass finally cracks. Not from rage, from relief. It can't hold you. They thought silence meant surrender. They thought when you stopped arguing, stopped explaining, stopped defending yourself, it was because you had nothing left to say. But silence was never your weakness, it was your evolution. You realized that noise was their oxygen. The louder you fought, the more they fed. Every word you spoke became another wire in their trap, another data point for their control. So you went quiet, not defeated, calculated. You became what they feared most, unreadable. The kind of quiet that feels like a storm holding its breath before it strikes. You started walking differently, not slower, not faster, just deliberate. Every step meant something. Every glance was an experiment. You spoke less, but when you did, it left echoes that lingered longer than their endless shouting. They tried to provoke you, push your button, draw you back into the chaos. But the version of you they built no longer existed. The one who needed their validation had been erased in silence. In its place stood something they couldn't manipulate. A mind that moved like smoke, slipping through every cage they tried to build. You began mastering the art of absence. You didn't need to win arguments anymore. You simply stopped participating in it. You didn't need to be understood. You became content being misunderstood. It was no longer about convincing any. It was about conserving energy for the war that mattered, the one fought in the shadows, where no applause exists and no eyes can see you rising. In that silence, you found something terrifyingly pure clarity, a clarity that felt ancient, like it had been waiting inside you for centuries, whispering, "This is how the unseen win." While they burned themselves out performing dominance, you learned the science of restraint. You stopped trying to be right in their world and started becoming unreachable. You realized that the loudest rooms were always filled with the weakest minds, that those who need to be seen are often terrified of their own reflection. So you stopped showing up, not out of fear, but because ghosts don't argue with mortals. You learned to disappear in plain sight, to blend, to adapt, to let them underestimate you until their arrogance became your camouflage. At night, while they slept under their illusions of control, you were awake, studying their system, how they talk, how they react, how they weaponize kindness. You decoded their patterns like an ancient text. Every betrayal, every lie, every forced smile, they became pieces of a map leading you towards something darker, mastery. You didn't seek revenge, you sought understanding. You realized true rebellion isn't noise, it's precision. It's becoming so emotionally controlled that no one can hijack your peace again. You turned every weakness into a weapon. Every scar became encrypted data. Every heartbreak a strategic upgrade. You trained your mind to move without emotion when needed, to observe without attachment, to retreat not in fear, but in strategy. You no longer begged for freedom, you operated it. And though they couldn't explain it, everyone around you could feel the difference. The temperature of your presence had changed. You weren't seeking power anymore, you becoming it. That's the paradox of your silence. It wasn't absent, it was ascension. You were not avoiding conflict. You were preparing for a different kind of war, a psychological war fought not with swords, but with stillness. They taught you noise. The world taught you distraction. But suffering taught you silence, and silence taught you control. Now, you walk among them untouched, unseen, unpredictable. You are no longer part of their system. You are the error in their code, the whisper they can't trace, the rebellion that doesn't roar. It listened. You start seeing them clearly now, the architects behind the illusion. They were never gods, only men with trembling hands pretending to pull strings. You remember how they smiled when you stumbled, how they whispered pity disguised as concern. You can still hear the applause when you broke, not out of empathy but entertainment. They fed on your confusion, your need to belong, your desperate hunger for approval. That was the first design flaw in their system. They mistook your kindness for blindness. They thought manipulation would keep you loyal. They didn't realize every betrayal was sharpening your vision. You begin to trace the outlines of their control, the subtle words that rewired your doubt. The systems built not to protect, but to measure obedience. Every reward was a leash, every compliment a collar. You start to see how the hierarchy fed itself, how those above you were prisoners too, just with better wallpaper. You understand now that fear was their currency, guilt their favorite weapon. But fear collapses once seen, guilt evaporates under truth. And the moment you name what they're doing, you feel the first fracture in their power. They sense it. The shift in your silence terrifies them. Your eyes no longer ask for permission. You no longer chase their approval. You study it, dissect it, strip it of mystery. The same people who once lectured you about loyalty now start to flinch in your presence. They try to bait you with chaos, provoke an old reaction, drag you back into their noise. But you no longer speak their language. You've switched dialects, from emotion to observation. Their control can't survive, refuse to feel for them. You realize now how small they've always been. The voices that once towered over your thoughts sound paper-thin under scrutiny. The power you once feared dissolves under your awareness, like fog retreating before dawn. You watch them scramble for relevance, rewriting rules they no longer understand. You become ungovernable, not by rebellion, but by perception. You didn't destroy their system, you simply stepped outside of it. And that's when you see it. Their panic disguised as order, their desperation posing as authority. You become a mirror they can't look into. The structure they built to control you is cracking, one truth at a time, because the moment you stop believing in their power, it stopped. They thought you'd fade quietly, that your silence meant defeat. But silence, in your hands, became a weapon sharper than any blade. You learned to move beneath their noise, to hear what wasn't said, to trace the tremor in their confidence when their control began to slip. They built their empire on your compliance, your guilt, your need to explain. But the moment you stopped reacting, the foundation beneath them began to rot. You didn't need to fight them, you just needed to stop feeding them. You began studying their methods like an ancient text, how they disguised manipulation as morality, obedience as virtue, loyalty as chains. You learned their language and rewrote it in reverse. Every tactic they used, delay, distraction, dominance, you inverted. You became the mirror that revealed their own reflection. When they tried to provoke you, you answered with stillness. When they lied, you offered silence. When they demanded emotion, you gave calculation. In their confusion, you found control. You realized that power isn't loud, it's surgical. It's the precision of knowing exactly when not to act. You started using their design against them, the timing, the hierarchy, the hunger for reaction. You withheld everything they needed, your energy, your explanation, your outrage, and like a starving beast, the system began feeding on itself. The same fear they once used to enslave you started devouring that. Feel it, the shift. The very architecture they used to trap you became your camouflage. You moved unseen through the cracks of their illusion, manipulating the levers they thought you'd never touch. You became what they feared most, unpredictable. You no longer chased fairness, you studied leverage. You no longer sought justice, you built inevitability. They tried to isolate you, not realizing solitude was your forge. In silence, you became fluent in patterns, in power, in the psychology of collapse. You learned that empires don't fall from attack. They fall from withdrawal. Every moment you refused to play, their structure weakened. You became a storm hidden behind restraint, a presence that unsettled the air without a single word. And when the time came, you didn't strike, you simply let them face them. The system cracked under the weight of its own deception. You walked away untouched, leaving behind not a battle, but an echo. The quiet proof that the most dangerous retaliation isn't destruction, it's evolution. They called it order, structure, stability. But you see it now for what it always was, a machine feeding on obedience, a self-sustaining illusion built from borrowed conviction. You once believed the gears were too large to break, too sacred to question. Yet now, standing on the other side of its hum, you realize the system was never immortal. It was human, fragile, dependent on your silence to spinning. And when you stopped reacting, when you refused to feed it with fear or validation, it began to collapse, quietly, almost respectfully. At first they laughed, then they whispered, then they panicked. You didn't strike back, you didn't scream, you simply stopped. And in that stillness, something ancient shifted. The same principle that crumbled empires when their gods were forgotten. You watched the architects of your cage turn on each other, gnawing at shadows that no longer obeyed. Their confidence cracked, their smiles became tremors. The same language they once used to control you now twisted back upon them, a serpent devouring its own tail. You felt no joy in it, only a strange, heavy silence, because you knew this wasn't real. This was nature correcting imbalance. The collapse wasn't loud or cinematic, it was slow, internal, psychological. Their control depended on your participation, and without you, they lost their reflection. You became the void that terrified them. Every conversation they started died mid-sentence. Every manipulation fell flat. They could not read you anymore, and that unreadability was fatal to their design. You learn the final law of power. You never fight the system directly. You starve it. You starve it of your outrage, your explanation, your need to be seen. You cut the oxygen of attention, and in time, its machinery begins to suffocate. The gears turn slower. The hierarchy starts to, and the people who once thrived inside it begin to whisper the same phrase you once did: something feels wrong. Now you move through its ruins like a ghost that remembers everything. You see them trying to rebuild what was never real. You hear their speeches, their apologies, their desperate rewrites of history. But the spell is broken. You are no longer a character in their story. You are the silence that rewrote the script. The machine didn't burn. It withdrew into itself, and all that remains is the echo of what once tried to own you. You walk through the aftermath silence. The ruins of what once ruled you hum faintly like dying circuitry. Their system, the one built on your obedience, your doubt, your desperate hunger to be seen, now flickers in the distance like a memory that no longer remembers itself. You don't look back. You don't need to. You've learned that the final stage of power is indifference. Not revenge, not victory, but the absence of their gravity. You move like someone who was seen behind the code and returned untouched, carrying no anger, only knowledge. They thought you'd seek recognition. They thought you'd want to be crowned after the fall. But crowns are still part of kingdom. You no longer belong to any. The silence inside you is not emptiness, precision. Every emotion once used to trap you has been stripped down, refined, repurposed into clarity. You've mastered the oldest principle of war. Never fight what's collapsing. Instead, step aside and let gravity finish what arrogance began. You have. And now the sound of their collapse feels almost sacred, like justice delivered by silence itself. There's a shadow in you now, but it no longer consumes. It guards. It observes. It whispers when needed and vanishes when not. You become fluent in what the ancients called detachment, the art of walking through fire and smelling of rain. The same mind they tried to break now operates beyond emotion, beyond permission. You don't chase, you pull. You don't argue. You alter the temperature of rooms. Your presence bends the atmosphere because it no longer seeks entry. It defines it. They watch you, some from afar, some pretending not to. They can't name what you've become. To them, you are an anomaly, a person who survived the collapse of belief. You've broken the algorithm of control by no longer reacting to it. That's the secret the system was never designed to withstand. A human being who sees through its illusion. They cannot calculate what doesn't conform. They cannot own what doesn't. And that is your ascension, not into light, but into awareness. You don't speak much anymore. Words were the first chain. You let silence speak for you, and somehow it echoes louder than their entire machinery. You were not the glitch. You were the quiet update, the line of unseen code that rewrote everything they thought they understood about control. And now, they're still trying to fix a system that no longer exists.